Welcome back, dear friends. I think I actually know where I am now because I finished editing the last video last night, so that should be posted shortly. So we're in sync, which is great. So the next job is to revisit that wretched silver disc again. It's painted and it's dry for 24 hours, but I'm not going to touch it. There's that wretched bit, glue a new gem in the middle, screw it onto there, and then somehow try and get it in there without scratching that or the silver bit or anything else. I think it's going to be quite a tight fit. So wish me luck. I think that's the first job for today. I'll let you share in the magic. I've got that screwed on, that's the crank. I've got me gem on a bit of blue tack. Oh, so many things can go wrong. I'm going to put a couple of drops of super glue on the back of the lens. Gem. Try again. Oh my godfathers. This is just jinxed, this thing. But that is now the gem. That's in there. Oh. I need to lie in a darkened room for a while. I suppose I better just get on and screw it now onto there. It's some time later, but I'm absolutely thrilled to have got that gear back in without scratching it or anything else. Only problem is, stupidly, I put this support on while that gear was out. It now rubs on it just a little bit each time round. So as needle files or taking the whole thing off and doing something else, I opted for needle files. They really are wonderful things if you get a good quality set, because they remain so sharp, and there was just room to put this little one just in there and to file. It didn't take much because it was very close, but that's great. It now turns without making any of the squeaking and crunching noises. Now I've got that sorted out, I also noticed that the balls on the governor were just touching that. And I realised just before trying to take the whole thing apart, by sliding this up and down in that adjustable pulley there, I can adjust it. Oh, fantastic. And now I know that this clears that and all the rest. I've stuck the brass painted wooden ball on the top. Just nice with little balls sticking out here and there, and that one on the top of that spindle. Ooh, lovely. The other thing I did last thing yesterday was to make up this Limelight oxyacetylene lamp thing that they used to use. Well, that's where the expression comes from, the sort of actors in the limelight, before incandescent lamps and things like that. They'd spray acetylene on a little lump of limestone, I think, and it would burn. It would turn the heat from the acetylene torch into an incredibly white light. Well, lime colour light. Well, it's limestone. Oh, stop it. Anyway, so a machine like this needs some sort of optical creative device. Just a light. I'll just say it needs a light. So here's the light. That's going to hold the lens that I managed to work out how to make yesterday. Improved the design, added some screw holes. What I discovered was this cast iron paint is really acts like glue. Now I'm going to have to get the scalpel and cut that off. It took quite a lot to prise that off. But let's get that off and then we can get the lens assembled inside it. Because if you remember the original one, here's the original lens and stuff that I used with all the controls for getting a nice white pure light. And there's a printout on acetate illuminated by two different LEDs to give the impression that there is a little bit of lime in there that's got gas being projected towards it. So my in-depth instructions suggest I need 2 pieces of tracing paper right up against the lens to act as a screen. I prefer using tracing paper because it's slightly grainy, which is lovely considering the sort of standard of lenses in Victorian times. Well, some of them anyway. It's nice to have an image that's not quite right and slight aberrations. Is that the right word? I can't remember. So I'm getting ready to put that on, fix it together. I found a couple of nice little knobs and twiddly bits for the controls. Of course, I need to do the laser engraving for the labels. These are the remaining 4 labels. What a palaver trying to get them out of brass colour. Because as before, I sprayed some normal black on white laser engraving laminate with brass, but then found that the soot that was produced, I usually get off with isopropyl alcohol, but that would also take the paint off, so I couldn't use that. So then I had to mask off all the surrounding areas with masking tape, and then I've just discovered that it hasn't cut all the way through. So what fun! I'll try and get all these, and then of course I've got to pick out all of the little bits of masking tape from the middle of each letter. Oh, joy. Smaller than grains of rice. What are they? They're the middle of these O's. O's? But that looks nice. That's coming on nicely. I've done that one. Now I've got to peel off all the masking tape from these two. It's just so precise. It's amazing. I've got that mounted. And that doesn't look at all shabby. It's got a knob and a little sign on it. Also screwed on the oxygen-hydrogen mix adjuster thing plate, but I didn't have any big twiddly screws, and I noticed these two offcuts that were originally the counterweight for the bellows on the ukulele playing machine, but they didn't work for some reason, weren't heavy enough, so I ended up cutting them in half, and I suddenly thought this 4mm or 5mm rod, brush rod, fits through the middle, so I can make them look like control knobs that fit on there, and then screw them on with an M4 screw that goes through the middle. How lovely to recycle stuff, and they're beautiful, beautifully turned up. So here's the finished side. There's the viewing window. I've added one of the keys from the net thread bells actually, because that looks really nice with the brass fitting. That's the oxygen hydrogen setting. Then those two down there, very pleased with how they've turned out. Because the customer does really like brass, hence the fact that all the engravings are brass on with black lettering this time. Now, I think I fancy turning it around 180 degrees and doing the other side, because I can finally, having said, I think in probably the first episode that I was going to do the horn, I can do the horn now, because I know where it's going to fit, and I've screwed, most importantly, that piece of wood on to fix yet another Munson ring on. Munson rings are good. They're the way forward. Now, if you remember all that way back, I bought a trumpet. What was it? Wasn't it a bugle, I think? An educational bugle, about 12 pans, that's playable for educational purposes until you saw it into little pieces, which I then did, because that bit had to sort of reach the back, and this is obviously originally just one long length, so there's that bit, and then there was this bit, which was the offcut and the first curve. I managed to file that down, and it just fits into a 15mm end feed fitting, because that's obviously going to be that bit. And then the curve at the top, because originally this was made from a real trumpet that was all battered and picked up some junk place. I've got one of these fittings, and I managed to remount a piece of 22mm copper by jamming a socket into it. Would you believe it? It worked with a vice. Here it is actually. Here's the socket, and I found it was just wider than 22mm. And I just rammed it, especially with that lovely sort of curve there, just squashed it in a vice, and it did open out the end of the 22mm pipe, so it pushed onto the end of the horn. Very little planning as always, so now I can change the direction with that bit. Right, let's get that. I haven't painted it because I don't want to scratch all the paint off fiddling and farting around when I come to fixing it onto this one. So I'm going to get it all set up, lined up, glued together, and then I'll paint it. So I have got the horn lined up with the Munson ring and a Munson ring extender to get it all to sort of be the right shape. There's that bit. I've also glued on that angle, having forgotten that in fact I'd prepared this one a lot earlier, and it had slid underneath there and I'd lost it. I thought, I'm sure I remember something like that. Anyway, this one will work perfectly, so I've dripped super glue around, and that's now setting. Now it's time to add the audible plentitude, piano or forte, I think. The volume control, which doesn't do anything again, it's purely decorative. I used for the original one of these beautiful gate valves, 15mm compression gate valves. They are really useful. I use them for lots of the bigger machines to actually turn working encoder inside so that they can actually control an Arduino and things. But they're really expensive for the whole thing, and I only need the bit that you see at the top. So I got thinking and looking, and in my box of plumbing bits I found for some reason 2 of these red handles. I've got absolutely no idea why. I would have thought I would have run out of other things before the red handles. Anyway, I then found one of these shafts from a drawer full of other plumbing parts that fits onto it. And I've just found one of these 8mm to 15mm compression reducers, or enlargers depending on your point of view. So I might have to turn it down. I'm going to try and work out how to fix that on there. That will produce the tap. It turns out the shaft is 8mm. These front bits will take 8, but there's a little ridge inside to stop you poking the pipe in too far. Look at this. So I need to drill a hole for that, 21mm, just below that other sign, shiny sign. The best way to do it, because it's through 3mm plywood, is again beautiful hole saws, and I just happen to have one that's 21. And because they're just cutting rotarily, they're not going to suddenly rip pieces of thin wood off or anything. Oh, I'm very pleased with that. Looks just like the real thing. I cut a washer out of 2mm thick black acrylic because it just needed a certain je ne sais quoi. And the black of that goes so nicely with the black of that. There's an interesting little motif, if you will. Right, time to take the dog for a walk. And here she is. It's walk time, Ziggy. Oh, what have you got? What have you got there? What have you got? Yes! It's the next day and the super glue has set, I won't say dried. And I'm really pleased because normally I wipe any excess off, and because I hadn't intended to use this fitting, I'd had that other one. But I just dripped super glue around here. This is slightly conical, so it had room to run in, and that's actually set beautifully, just being left. Because that's nice, because the other day when my super glue tube kept getting blocked, I poked something in the end and just squirted a load out, and I thought, just see what happens if you leave it alone. I couldn't help but fiddle with a couple of bits. But after about an hour, it had set and kept all of its nice shape and things, so I'm really pleased with that. Now I'm going to glue that on, and then I'm going to glue that to that, then we can paint it. Whoops, never mind. The most important thing is this horn. Ooh, that's so exciting. It reminds me of one of the machines, which I think had a lot to do with my love of this sort of machine. The Bibo and Ben books, just beautifully illustrated. But I always remember the one with lots and lots of horns and things on it. So whilst that is drying, I really do need to get on and work out where to put this PIR sensor, because it's one of the last things to do. These projects are amazing. Quite often when I first start one, I find it really daunting, just the enormity of it. And I've learnt just to break it into teensy little bits and don't think about anything else. Just make the wooden frame at the back. Don't think about anything else. Doing it like that, and then you suddenly realise that actually you've almost finished it. It's happened to me several times. Oh, is that it? The clue obviously is, oh, there's lots of clues, but one of them is when all the piles and bits and pieces that you've painted slowly disappear until there's nothing left except a copper bit that you forgot. So the PIR, well, here it is. I do like these ones. I sometimes use small ones made by Philips, I think, but these are much more readily available and very well priced. They're made by lots of different manufacturers inevitably, but they all look exactly the same. I did once have one batch from I think Amazon that none of them worked, but that's the only issue I've ever had with them, and they really are lovely. Not too big, they run off 5 volts, so they're compatible with the Arduino. There's 2 settings on the side. I know what they are because I've forgotten so many times. I've stuck that up there. So the one on the left is sensitivity, and they really are sensitive. Right from, well, as it says, 7 meters away, but it's sometimes even more than that. And then the time delay, that's how long they stay on once they're triggered, up to 5 minutes, which is what we require for this one. And they've even got a little tab there that you can set it to re-triggerable, which means that every time someone moves in the room, it'll reset it and start timing the 5 minutes again. So you need to mount that somewhere. Now I have to say a very big thank you to long-term viewer Ibrahim, because I had lost, I think I mentioned it, I had no record of ever having made the previous one of these Epizoescopes, and I wanted to look at it and remind myself how I'd done things. I'm pleased in a way that I didn't find it, because if I had found that I'd already made a series, I may not have bothered to make this series, and I really do enjoy making these videos and all the support and encouragement that you provide. But thanks to Ibrahim, I did manage to find it. I must have erased every mention of it off my computer during one of my purges. So I've been able to look at the original last video for this series, and I found out where I put the PIR sensor. There's the original video, and look, I put it there. And it obviously worked there, so that's where it's going to go. I will start drilling an eel for my lovely little PIR sensor. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to fit here, because on the inside, with this version of the frame, there's all those other large bits of wood, so the actual available space, as you can see, where the end of that brass fitting is really over to the left, and I can't cut all this wood away. So, well, I've spent about 15 minutes wandering around the workshop trying to push that into a variety of different pipes and things, and I noticed these offcuts. These offcuts came from the stop end fitting for the motor housing that needs to be cut down. I'm so pleased that I kept this, and 2 offcuts, one from this machine, one from the previous machine, of the thread, because it just fits inside, and with one of those pieces of thread stuck out the front and another out the back, it covers the circuit. Isn't that exciting? Because it means that I can cut a piece of 2mm black acrylic, glue it on the front with a hole in for the lens, because I've discovered that it looks really nice there. The fact is, with the horn this side that's going to be quite predominant, is that the word? This just fits in there beautifully, and I'm going to leave it black, because again you've got the black there, the dark bit in here, the black along there. I think that will look really nice. Look, I've made a little enclosure. Isn't that delightful? For the PIR sensor. I've cut a bit of 10mm out of the back, which I've just realised I've forgotten to paint black or brass, never mind, with a diangular hole. Diangular? Diangular? It's not, well, it could be triangular or diagonal. So diangular hole for the 3 wires to come down, and a nail in the top to screw it, fix it down. It just sits nicely with 2 of those prongs resting. So I think that'll look nice. I'll try and sort out the painting of this bit. In the end, I thought it looked nicer with a brass back actually on this, so I might use a bit of masking tape. And while that's drying, I've put the horn on. Excellent. So that's looking really nice. And as I tightened it, it just slightly sloped inwards like the original one did anyway. Oh, that does look very pleasant. I must stop saying everything's so lovely. So it actually theoretically is a working horn, because it just connects to 15mm copper pipe all the way through. Because I'm going to try and put that up against some grills, inevitably at the far side. Come on, focus. With little speakers inside them. So I'm going to try and just sort of put it up against it and see whether it will actually, the sound will transmit along the pipe and then out of the horn, because that'll be fun if it does. I was just about to start drilling holes, and I thought, let's just have one more look at where else it could possibly go. And I tried it where I thought the PIR was going to go, and I think I prefer it there. And there we are. It's fitted on, and I've kept all the CAD drawings for this because it's a really useful little thing to have. So that's all wired up. I've got an increasing number of wires. I think I've got 4 or 5 pairs now. Sig, do you want to go for a walk? Siggy, come on then. Let's try it with the lead. That's better. A little bit of action, activity. Thanks very much for watching. I think it's probably a good time to stop. Hope to see you next time when we're going to introduce some leg trickery.